Good afternoon, everyone. So let's start wrapping up our table conversations. It's good to see a lot of you guys back. We're on the first day of the Conference for Change, which is it's unique, but it seems like it's going to give us a bit more time than what we've had in the past. So let's just get the show started. A couple of days ago, I was meeting with a client for a board search, and they were making a lot of emphasis on disruption and innovation. And one of the questions that they asked me was, how qualified are you, or what qualifies you to be able to do a search that involves disruption and innovation? In the back of my mind, I thought, I grew up getting kicked out of school for being disruptive. So it's kind of cool that it's now a sexy term. So if irreverent takes the same path, I think I'm going to be very well off. So our first speaker is going to be Susan Steele, and she's going to be talking to us about the involvement of technology and technological advances in the workplace. I think this comes in a very interesting time for the industry, for search. There's been a lot of talk about artificial intelligence. We had an interesting conversation last year about it. There's been a lot of talk about GDPR in Europe. How personal data is being stored and used is at the forefront of many conversations. 3 months ago, if you would have asked me what I thought about GDPR in the US and the possibilities, my answer would have probably been different than what it is today after hearing Mark Zuckerberg in front of Congress a couple of days ago trying to defend the ability to be able to collect personal data. So I think that we're facing interesting times. I think a lot of the change is not going to be driven by us, but that's part of what we'll end up discussing today. So our first speaker is Susan Steele. Susan is the Executive Partner for Global Talent and Engagement Center of Excellence at IBM. She advises C-suite executives on the workforce strategies that increase revenue, enhance profit, and create change. So Susan, welcome, and you've got the stage.
Okay, thank you. So good afternoon, everybody. This is an enormous topic, and we've got all of 60 minutes to cover it. So we're going to go fast, but at the end of the day, this session is for you. And you're in a safe environment where you can ask lots of questions, including all those questions you maybe don't want to ask in front of your teenage son or daughter. But we can ask here, and we can discuss them, okay? So feel free to jump in with questions, comments, and I'll sort of help us move forward as needed. But really, this session is for you. So we start off with some context setting. And I think we're all feeling, whether it's the GDPR issues or other issues, that things are moving really fast, and we're into a new era. We're seeing this in a number of areas. Obviously, business disruption. I find it fascinating that supposedly 75% of the Fortune 500 companies will not exist by 2027. So that's enormous. That's fast. We're seeing this play out with what we call experience disruption, which is all of us coming into the workplace are used to having great experiences as consumers. So when we're in the workplace, we have expectations that everything will work as beautifully as it does on Netflix or on Amazon or wherever we go as consumers. And sadly, for many of us in the workplace, that's actually not the experience. And then we also are facing disruption in terms of talent. Now, this room knows that very well. Your clients are experiencing this, you're experiencing this. But the reality is that there's new skills needed. We've got to get the right skills in the right place at the right time. That means looking in new places. We're going to hear about looking into new talent pools. And maybe increasingly even looking at people without university degrees, but people who have the technical skills that are needed to help organizations drive the change they need. So with all of this, we think that these disruptions are completely changing the way HR is delivered and arguably the way talent acquisition is delivered. So what does that mean? Well, we feel that really there's two key threads here. One is being much more talent-focused, more talent-centric to create that great employee experience or candidate experience. And then the second area is really leveraging the technology. And in particular, we're going to talk about cognitive computing, artificial intelligence, you can call it a number of different things, but leveraging this new technology to help drive transformation in the workplace, but more importantly, to help with all this disruption that organizations are facing or looking to harness to their advantage. So who's familiar with artificial intelligence, cognitive? I mean, how many of you are using that either yourselves in your businesses or maybe with your clients? I just want to understand who's already had some experience with this. Okay, so we have a few folks in the room, but many of you maybe are still on that learning curve. So those of you who do have experience, feel free to jump in here with your own comments and observations. So we'll start off with just some definitions. So what is cognitive computing? What is artificial intelligence? And I think it's interesting just to break it down into a few component parts. Firstly, artificial intelligence can understand everything. So what that means is it can look at all this unstructured data. So that could be a video, that could be audio, that could be sound information, audio recordings from a contact center, a call center, for example. It could be music, it could be x-rays, it could be art. All of these things, now suddenly artificial intelligence can scan through as if it was reading an article. It's that easy. And of course, do that in vast scale and quantity and speed. The next thing it can do is once it's looked through all of this information, it can come up with hypotheses about what does that mean. I see this, I conclude that. So it offers up hypotheses and degrees of certainty about its hypothesis. And we're going to see that in some of the demos that I'll take you through today. We'll see how that's being used. Of course, it's cognitive, so it means it's learning. And we say that the worst day with AI is day one. Every day after that is better because the tool is that much smarter, it knows that much more, but it's learning over time. And then, of course, the interaction, because it can interpret sounds, because it can deliver sounds, it's always engaging and interacting. So it creates a very personalized experience. Gone are the days of one size fits all. Now with AI, everything's personalized. Okay? So high-level definition of what cognitive computing is. So now let's consider what it isn't. We read all these articles about, AI taking over the world, we're all going to be out of jobs, and robots are going to reign. Well, we don't really see it that way. We actually see that this is about augmenting human performance, not replacing it. And I think that's a really important distinction because we're not going to be losing our jobs, just the opposite. But we're going to have amazing tools to help us do our jobs better. And I really think that's true in the executive search space as well. Some of the boring, humdrum stuff that we've had to do for years, you won't really have to do that as much anymore. But it will free you to be interacting with candidates, with clients, and do the things that humans do best. Now, another question people ask me, especially from an IBM perspective, is what is Watson? We've all seen those ads with Watson. He's in the corner, he's cute, he's got a funny voice, and he's interacting with Bob Dylan or Serena Williams or all sorts of people. But so what is Watson? Watson started off as a huge set of computers in one massive room. That was the Watson that won Jeopardy. And that was less than a decade ago, okay? So it took all that computing power to do one thing, which was play and win at Jeopardy. Okay, that's one task. That's all it did. It took up a huge room. Now, fast forward to today, 2018, we have Watson in the cloud. So Watson's not sitting in a room anymore. But Watson is a whole set of APIs, sort of building blocks that you can configure and put together to address whatever the issue is. So you can see here, for example, analyzing tone. So I write something, and we use this all the time now at IBM. I write a memo, or even in our feedback system, I write feedback to one of my team members. I can have it analyzed automatically for tone. Oh, you sound a bit angry there. Oh, you sound a bit, optimistic, a bit hopeful. Is that what you wanted to do? If that's the case, yes, fine. If not, it makes suggestions on how to revise the feedback. Tone analyzer. The same thing with speech. So in contact centers, call centers, people calling up, wanting help. So before an agent even picks up the phone, they'll get an assessment about stress, about anger, about whatever. We can analyze tone now. And visual insights as well, from whether it's x-rays or any sort of visual image, that's available as well. So these are all the building blocks that we use to develop a Watson solution, a Watson AI solution to help address a given problem. Okay? Everybody understand so far? Good. So let's look at sort of where this is going. IBM did some research. Now, this is from 2016, so it's a few years ago. But what it says is that CEOs definitely see cognitive and AI having a very big impact in the area of HR. And in fact, research shows that it's one of the top 5 areas where CEOs are investing. That's in the HR function, which I find very interesting because HR never gets investment, right? So now it turns out it's a big area of investment. And why is that? Because most organizations, as we know, are still having trouble recruiting the talent they need, developing that talent, and retaining it. So those challenges haven't gone away. And CEOs are starting to make the link now between using this AI technology and solving some of those very difficult issues in the HR space around talent. Now, what do HR leaders say? Well, HR leaders also agree. They see lots of use for AI in the HR space. But what I find interesting here is that the largest percentage is actually in the learning space. Now, it's maybe not terribly surprising when you think about how challenged organizations are to quickly develop the skills and capabilities they need against this backdrop of disruption, right? So maybe not surprising that that's where a lot of HR leaders want to put their AI dollars. In recruitment is surprisingly a little bit less. I personally find that surprising. But I would say, and I'm told this is being recorded, so I can't speak too confidentially here, but I do observe that a number of HR leaders are just not that aware of the possibilities of this technology. So I think this could, in some respects, be a reflection of their lack of understanding of what it could do. Because if I were in their shoes, I think I'd be putting more money on investing in the talent acquisition space than in some of these other areas. But this is where HR leaders are today. But what I think is very interesting is when we compare HR leaders in high-performing organizations versus sort of average-performing organizations. And this is where you really see the difference. So what this data shows us is that HR leaders who are in high-performing organizations are really much more likely to use AI and this new technology in these key areas of HR. And again, you can see where they're investing. Learning is a big one, but talent acquisition is up there as well. So this, to me, is a little bit more representative of this trend. How many of you work for clients today that use AI in some aspect of recruitment? Okay, so we're seeing, maybe 10% of the room here, 20%. So, I think that trend will continue. I suspect if we were to have this meeting next year, we'd see far more hands up with more organizations starting to use this. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how we're using AI at IBM. IBM HR is often, held out as an example of innovation. If you saw I think the most recent Harvard Business Review features some things that we're doing in the HR space and using AI. And so I think it's an example really of what we're going to be seeing more of. So to give you some context about IBM, we're obviously fairly big, we're fairly global. But maybe things you didn't know, especially because IBM's sort of known as a place where people go and stay and spend 20, 30 years there, is that actually we're going through a whole transformation. So it means that a lot of our talent is new. 50% of our employees have actually been at IBM for less than 5 years. So what that means is that when it comes to recruiting, onboarding, integrating, that's becoming, business as usual for us, whereas before that was less so. Also, you can see here, we're tapping into new talent pools. We're going after employees without university degrees as we search for the technical skills that we need. And that also creates recruiting challenges, it creates onboarding challenges and retention challenges as well. So just a bit of background on us so you can appreciate some of the things that we're doing. So we have gone in IBM from traditional focus on HR functions like recruiting, like learning, like comp and ben, to completely rethinking that around the employee journey, the employee life cycle. So what we've done is use design thinking to map out what are those key touch points. And in fact, there's one that's fallen off the end here, but that's exit. We actually have thought about how the exit experience is for employees. Because guess what? These folks many of them will come back to us as boomerangs. We're actively encouraging that. And, boomerangs sort of remember the last few weeks, right? And most organizations don't really think about how they exit people or don't really think about creating a great experience for employees in terms of the exit. So we've re-engineered everything to become more talent-centric. And a key enabler for that is some of the cognitive tools that we're using. And in fact, we have AI being used at every step of the employee journey. So what I thought might be interesting for us today is to show you some of these tools, because I personally found it very hard to understand how this technology could be applied until I saw it being used to address some of the more typical issues that organizations are facing as far as talent goes. So, of course, near and dear to all of our hearts here is talent acquisition. So the very first thing we found that we needed to address was a very typical issue, and you and your clients may have this same issue, and that is that they invest in putting together a great website, a great career site. And it's got videos, it's got testimonials, it's got all sorts of amazing things. But when the candidate or the random visitor to that site starts to look for a role, they have to start doing a lot of work. They've got to navigate, they've got to understand your business jargon, the client's business jargon. They have to understand divisions and locations and maybe some acronyms. And very often they just give up, okay? So, that's a pretty classic experience. But what if we could actually use AI the minute a candidate lands on the page to say, hey, upload your resume, or just point me to your LinkedIn profile, and I will scan all the jobs available right now in the organization. And I'm going to look for the ones that are best fit for your skills and your experience. Okay, so that's what we've developed. Major game changer in terms of the stickiness of our website, of our career site, the number of candidates who actually are progressing to apply for roles, and in many cases applying for roles that they hadn't really thought about. So for example, blockchain. Not many people coming through with blockchain on their resumes because it hasn't been around that long, right? So we have to use cognitive to sort of, just as we would as search consultants, look at a resume and say, oh yeah, I think they have some skills that would transfer into a blockchain sort of role. So that's what we're doing at scale with this tool. So rather than take you through a demo that I lead, what I've done is cheated a little bit and had one of our colleagues just do a quick little video on this. So this is not a Hollywood production video. I just want to sort of manage expectations here. This is sort of back office HR to HR here, explaining how this works, but it'll give you a good sense of it. So let's have a quick look.
You'll see here that the chatbot starts with a conversation. It asks the job seeker's name. From there, the job seeker is given some options. He searches for jobs in marketing. You'll notice it provides a list of results. That's where most searches start and end. But the Watson candidate assistant wants to know more, so it prompts Eric to give more information. The candidate uploads his resume. Watson now analyzes the resume and returns a new set of results. This time, based on those that are best fit for the candidate. Why is that important? Well, first, the candidate now has a better sense of how qualified he is for the job. The fit gauge and the word cloud tells him that. Even better, he is presented with a job that he never would have found on his own. Why? Because the keyword search would never have surfaced it. But because the results here are based on skill fit, he sees it and explores it. He can now research the jobs by clicking into them and even learning about the job families that they belong to. He's also able to jump right into the application process. But before he does that, he may want to do some more research. He may want to know, what is it like to work at IBM? He may know.
Okay, so that tells us, it gets into a chatbot, which we can discuss then, but you can see how just being able to quickly upload your resume and have it make recommendations about roles that are a good fit could be very compelling, right? So how many of you are seeing this sort of tool in use? I mean, I think there are some out there, but you've seen those? Yeah. And how does that work? Does it work along similar lines? Okay. Fantastic. Okay. So now the next stage is we've got our candidate through. We've matched them up with roles. They've applied. But now we're going to come in to look at the recruiting team and their world. Now, their world, of course, as you well know, is challenged with a lot of things. Firstly, how do they optimize their workload? You have X number of searches you're looking to fill, and you have this all the time with your organizations. Well, what if you could use AI to tell you about the likely degree of challenge or difficulty of any given search based on precedent, based on talent pools, based on the inherent complexity of the search, and then do that across 100 different roles that you're looking to fill at any one time. So you optimize the workload. That's one thing that we're doing with AI. Another thing we're doing with AI is we're customizing a message out to candidates. Now, you folks do this all the time. If you're talking to a prospective candidate, you're going to develop a message that really resonates with them in the moment. But imagine if you could, at the press of a button, having at your disposal latest insights from Twitter, from Glassdoor, from any sort of news feed, very much customized around the role, the organization, both the candidate's organization today, as well as your client's organization. So you have all of that just in the moment that you can draw on. Can be very powerful. So we use AI for that. But what I wanted to show you here is specifically using AI to help us go through a long list of candidates. Okay, so this is the classic issue. You've got lots of potential candidates that might be a fit. And it's not to say that, you just press a button and go out to lunch, but to use that to do some high-level filtering to get this down to a more manageable number. Now, in executive search, it's never so much a volume thing, unless maybe your client requires you to do an open search with applications coming in which case you could have quite a few, right? But you could imagine in many internal recruitment organizations, high volume recruiting, suddenly you've got hundreds of candidates, and you want to quickly sort through those to tell you the ones that are most appealing. So how are they most appealing? Well, one thing we can do is we can look at something called a success profile. Success profile is, I want to have more Eileens. She is the role model. And if we could clone Eileen and have 20 Eileens, that would be fabulous. So if we have our success profile and we know what that is, and every organization has these, they say we want more of X. What we're now going to do is compare and contrast every single potential candidate against that success profile and look for fit. Now, this again is something that all of us as recruiters can do, right? I get that. But doing this at scale, consistently, error-free, is something that's quite different. And again, bear in mind, some of these tools were built for IBM, where we're doing sort of turbocharged recruiting. So something like this may not be necessary in a very small organization, but obviously in bigger enterprises, this becomes very helpful. So I'll just walk you through how this works. Here you can see we have a role we're looking to fill, senior sales consultant, and forgive me, the person who put together this list has decided to use all male names, but I do know that normally that is not the case, so I just wanted to make that little observation that it's not a very diverse shortlist at the moment, or long list for that matter. And this example just shows 8. This in reality could be more like 80 or 800 for that matter. Okay, so what we're going to do is look at the role here, and now we're going to look at the success score, which is how do these candidates rate against our Eileen or our success profile. Okay, and what we're going to do is look at the top rated candidate, and you can see here the things that we said were important for this alignment with the success profile are things like the caliber of organization where he is today, the type of university he went to, the caliber of university, and then also some skills that we can infer from his resume, okay, and our degree of confidence in those. Now, this is a cognitive tool, so at every step of the way, we're asked to give feedback on how accurate was that, and if there were any inaccuracies, we could flag that. Now we're going to look at the top 3 candidates and compare them and understand the nuances between these 3 candidates. And you can see here that in terms of fit with the success profile, there's somebody who's clearly ahead of the others. But in terms of the skills match, in terms of our inferred insights about their skills, they're broadly the same. So we have some insights that we can use as we think about how to narrow down this very broad pool of candidates into a shorter pool of candidates that we'd want to look more closely at. At this point, there could be interviews, there could be phone screenings, whatever. But this is already giving us a bit of a head start against a much longer list of candidates. So now we've recruited our candidates, they're joining, but we're faced with a classic issue, which is onboarding. And when I was an HR leader, I was sort of obsessed by onboarding because I realized it made the difference, and you know this very well, makes the difference between a very successful recruitment approach and a maybe not so successful landing. And there's all sorts of research that says, candidates who eventually leave a role in the first year usually make up their mind in the first 30 days. So, let's orchestrate that first 30 days to be flawless. So one of the things that we realized at IBM is that with so many new hires coming in, and IBM being a pretty complex place, they had a lot of questions. And often things, slip through the cracks in the recruitment process. But if we weren't careful, the candidates would turn to all the wrong people to get information. Firstly, they turn to the recruiter. Like, how many of you are just, inundated with questions from your candidates, stuff that really, in an ideal world, the organization should have answered for them. Candidates turn to HR. Candidates turn to their new line manager, or just colleagues sitting next to them. So they go to all these different places for information. That impacts the productivity of all of those people, which we don't want. So what we did was put together an onboarding cognitive advisor to help candidates with all the questions they have as new hires. And at IBM, we make this available to candidates before they arrive. So in that pre-hire phase, they've accepted the offer, they haven't joined, and sort of anticipating the sort of questions they have. And then once they join and they're effectively in the organization and inside our firewall, then obviously they have access to even more information. But I'll just show you a little demo on how this works.
In this demo, I'm going to show you how we apply Watson to create an engaging experience for new hires. Now, if you think about it, new hires, whether they're experienced professionals or fresh out of college, they have a lot of questions. It's probably the time in an employee's career when the information needs are the greatest. So that makes it the perfect use case for a cognitive informational chatbot, or as we like to call it, an onboarding assistant. What I have here is Quinn. This is IBM's onboarding assistant for new hires, and she actually sits on our pre-boarding site on the external web so that people who, even before they started at IBM, they could start asking Quinn questions. Now, Quinn has been, because she's an onboarding chatbot, she's been trained on a broad variety of questions. But first, she's asking me for my name because she's being friendly. So I'm going to type my name in there. And I'm going to start with an easy but likely common question for new hires. I'm going to ask Quinn, well, when do I start? And Quinn responds by politely telling me that my start date is actually on my offer letter, and that I can also find the location and the time when I'm expected to be there. Notice that Quinn is asking me for some feedback. All of our conversational solutions have this feedback option, and by providing feedback, this is how our chatbots learn over time and get better. So if there's a question that she doesn't answer correctly, she can use that information, and the team that actually supports Quinn can use the information to train her and make sure that she gets the right answer in the future. So let's try a question on a completely different topic. Let's ask Quinn, when do I get paid? So Quinn responds by telling me that IBMers in North America get paid on the 15th of the month and the last day of the month, and she also gives me a link to the payroll calendar. So that's great. Now, the power of Watson in a chatbot really comes in being able to understand and interpret questions no matter how they are asked. So how about this one? Let's ask Quinn a question that she probably doesn't hear that often. Let's ask a question like, can I wear sandals? And when I ask that question, Quinn correctly interprets that as being a dress code question, and she tells me that IBM does not have a dress code, but we encourage IBMers to dress for their client. And when in doubt, it's always a good idea to ask your manager. Now, you may look at this and say, well, that's easy. Because I had wear in there, Quinn could obviously tell that when I talk about wear, I'm asking about clothing, and that's obviously a dress code question. So let's see if we can trick Quinn. Let's ask her the question, where do I go on my first day? Notice here that I've misspelled where. Instead of spelling it W-H-E-R-E, I spelled it W-E-A-R. So if Quinn is keying off where, she's going to respond to this question as if it was a dress code question. Let's see what she says. So I asked that question, and Quinn responds by telling me I should ask my manager where and when I should report. So she was able to recognize that I spelled where wrong, but the intent of my question was really to understand where I need to go on my first day. Now, Quinn also actually has a bit of a personality. She's a jokester, so I can ask Quinn something silly like, okay, Quinn, tell me a joke. And Quinn responds by saying, what happens to a frog's car when it breaks down? It gets towed away. Okay. So you can see that chatbots, not only can they answer important questions and provide information in real time, but they also can have personalities that provide a more engaging experience for new hires. Thanks for watching.
So yeah, it gives you a sense, but this has been an enormous boost to productivity, both for new hires as well as for the support around them, the line managers, recruiting, HR, and other colleagues as well. And what's great is it gets a lot of our employees used to using these tools, these chatbots, from the get-go, right? It just becomes how we work. And many of our new hires are used to that anyway from life outside work, and take to that very easily. And by the way, no problem if you want to ask somebody a question directly. Of course, there'll be things that you want to do and ask directly. But this takes care of a lot of the basic blocking and tackling that often happens with new hires. So now we'll go on to talent development, because I think this is the next big pain point for most organizations, which how do we quickly upskill or reskill our talent to make sure they have the capabilities that our business needs. And at IBM, given all the transformation we're going through and all the new technologies emerging, this is a very key area for us and for our people. So what we did was we decided we had to completely rethink learning, and in particular, how people engage in learning these days. So gone are the days where you're going to sit down and do a 1 hour or a 3 hour e-learning course. People don't learn that way. I mean, think about it now. If you want to learn something, what do? You go to YouTube, you watch a quick video on it, and then you can do it, right? So we had to completely rethink our approach to learning by making it more bite-sized, in the moment, and easy to find. If anybody's ever gone onto a learning management system, you just want to die, because it's hard to find things, and when you do find something, it's old. Nobody's looked at it for 5 years, and the content's out of date. So we had to completely rethink the learning experience by not only using cognitive to plow through all of our learning content, but also to point people specifically to the exact content that's relevant for them. So we can take a TED Talk and point to the exact 60 minutes in that TED Talk that's relevant to illustrate a learning point about X, right? So you don't even have to watch the whole TED Talk. Or we can point you in a podcast to a specific concept that's being explained. And all of these things then help make learning faster, more fun, and guess what? Our learning, number of hours of learning has gone through the roof, but the cost of it has gone down. So it's exactly the right ratio that we want to see. And all of this is served up in a personalized way. So, what I see when I open up my screen would be very different from what you see when you open up yours. Everything's served up based on our role, based on our career plans, based on our performance, our geography, and so on. So I'll just show you, this is a better video in terms of the quality of the video, just a little bit more on how that works.
From the music on our smartphones, to the TV shows we stream, to the news feeds we follow, we personalize the flow of information that surrounds us. Now it's time to get even smarter. Introducing IBM's Your Learning, a learning platform that's revolutionizing how hundreds of thousands of IBMers learn, grow, and explore their interests. Your Learning is like Netflix for your professional development, personalized with cognitive capability that understands just what you like a trusted advisor, but without office hours. Your Learning has easy access to hot learning topics, career roadmap, customizable channels, and the Your Learning queue to help you access relevant learning whenever you want. Our industry is changing at light speed. We must continually upgrade our skills to stay relevant and move ahead. saving time and being smarter is what your learning is all about. What will you learn today?
So that explains how it works. But as with all this technology, a big challenge is how do we get people to use it? Okay, so it's one thing to invest and come up with, Netflix for learning and all of these things, but what if nobody actually uses it? So that was our big fear with this, because let's face it, so many people had had bad experiences with learning systems in the past that nobody was jumping up and down to have a new learning system, even if we thought it is pretty amazing. So one of the things we had to do as part of our change management was sort of get a little buzz and excitement out there. So we did something that was pretty unusual, which is that we put together some fun videos, put them out on YouTube a couple months before we launched to start to create some interest and excitement around this. So we knew, obviously, on YouTube, people who weren't at IBM would see this as well. That was fine. We figured maybe candidates would see it or people referring talent. But I'll just show you the sort of thing we did just to generate some interest in this.
All right, so I got everything set up for you on here.
Oh,
And I've added Your Learning to your home screen.
you're learning?
Oh, you're gonna love it. It's a personalized learning site based on your interests, your job, and your career goals.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it makes it really easy to find learning.
You set all of this up for me?
Yeah. Oh, well, not just for you.
You didn't have to do this, really.
Oh, no, I didn't. Your learning is personalized for every IBMer, so.
Sure it is.
Why are we whispering?
Don't worry, I won't tell anybody.
Oh, no, tell everybody.
Yeah, so this created a lot of interest even before we started, and as I said, the take-up on this has been enormous. But we realized that above and beyond learning, there was a pretty much insatiable need for career support and career development support. And as line managers, we just didn't have the time to provide that personalized attention and information that every employee wanted and frankly should have access to. So again, we brought in cognitive technology here to help deliver up personalized career advice, individualized down to each person based on their interests, their career plans. And we have a tool that internally is called MICA, which stands for My Career Advisor. And this actually can be used on a phone or on a laptop, whatever, and basically frees up managers to have those great one-on-one conversations with people without having to worry about doing all the research about what learning they should do or what career options might be available to them, because now all of that is being addressed through this cognitive tool. So remember we said that cognitive is about augmenting performance. So we see this tool as effectively augmenting what a manager can do because it takes a lot of the information provision off their plate and delivers it up in a more personalized fashion. So we'll have a quick look on how this works.
Welcome. I'm Micah, your personal career advisor. I'm so glad you're here and excited about all the ways we can work together to advance your career. I'm brand new at this, which means for now, we can work together on improving your current skills, finding your next role, and exploring career paths. It also means that I may not get it totally right every time, so please be patient while I learn and provide me with feedback as we work together so that I can improve. Are you ready to get started? Here's a quick overview of the things we can tackle together, no matter where you are in your career. If you're looking for your next role, check out job opportunities and see what types of positions I've matched you with. Interested in your long-term planning or wanting to know how to make a career change? Using Career Navigator, we can map out your next few roles and put together a plan to help you achieve it. Ready to have a growth mindset and build your skills? Visit recommendations and see the learning I've picked out for you. Don't forget to stop by the dashboard to get up to speed on all your personal talent data. Like your time in band, Sync 40 progress, and performance history. I'm always here for you. You can pop back to the Ask Micah screen at any time to chat. And you can ask me direct questions like what jobs are available that match my skills, or what learning is available for me, and I'll take you to what you need to know. I'm really excited you're here, and I look forward to working together.
So think about how something like this works to foster internal mobility, right? So now I don't have to go and look at a job board because I have Micah making recommendations based on all the data that that tool can pull in about my performance, time in role, accomplishments, and so on, and can make recommendations in terms of other roles that I can move to, and in fact, other vacancies available right now. So I think what this means is we're going to see much more internal mobility as organizations struggle to get the skills they need. And that means, I think, that it will free up the really tough roles to be handed over to folks like you to address. But some of those easy-to-fill internal roles will be filled now more readily with talent moving internally. Okay, Eileen. Mic here.
How popular is Micah? Because that is it's a very new way of an employee thinking about how they're engaging and how they're communicating what their career aspirations are. I would think for some of your long-term employees, it might be a little difficult to navigate.
Sure.
How's that working?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the use of this tool has exceeded our expectations, let's put it that way. We also had those concerns. Will people really use this? It's one thing using a chatbot to ask about, when your start date is. It's another thing to ask sort of more personal questions. And, I think we had the comment earlier about just all of this security and personal information, and I don't know, I could see how it could be uncomfortable for some people, but actually amongst the employees where we've piloted around the world, the take-up has been very substantial, and in fact far better than we thought it might be. Now, arguably, it was never aimed at the C-suite. The C-suite's not going to go on there and ask Micah, what should I do next? This is for sort of the more junior levels in the organization, but frankly, where it could be very advantageous to us to keep that talent, right? So, the further up the organization chart you go, the less of a need you're going to have for this, the more nuanced the career advice is going to be, and you're going to turn to the usual sources like a mentor, like a coach, and so on. But the take-up has been very positive, and we're still seeing that grow as people, remember it's there, learn to use it, and continue to consult that. And the other thing we found is that managers say that the conversations they're having with their team members are now much better because they're much more focused on things that make sense for a manager to be discussing with an employee. Things about style, things about, I have an intuition, this might be a good fit for you, whatever. But things that are best done face-to-face by humans. Yeah.
Susan, how does Micah interact with any kind of performance planning or succession planning?
All of that data can be integrated. So if it's there, Micah will draw on it. So great example, succession plans, performance data. So Micah knows my performance, and probably Micah's not going to suggest something for me if I've not done well in a given area. Micah may recommend sort of more remedial actions for me based on my historical performance. Yeah.
I have a question about data. How big a data set do you need for this to be effective? I mean, most of us in the room are boutiques, so is it our data? Is it the client's data? Is it anonymized, secondary source data? How does that get put together in order for this to be effective?
So, right now this is, a separate data set based on, it's not commingled data. So this isn't like a tool where you just go online and, 1-800-MICAH and your information's in there with everybody else's. Each one of these would be set up with an own data set in a given organization. I mean, this is the IBM data set. Yeah. The other things, same thing. It's all based on an organization's own data. There's no commingling of data. Now, sometimes you want the tool to look outside. So I think I mentioned about looking at, social scrapings from Glassdoor, for example. That's the tool looking outside and making inferences about external data. But yeah, I mean, and I don't know, there are a lot of tools out there, and I'm sure there's some that would be a good fit for smaller organizations that leverage some of this technology. But you're right, I think, to scrutinize the data security there on those. I don't know, because normally, whether it's IBM or IBM clients, volumes, size is usually not an issue. It's usually the other way around, how fast can it go? Yes?
I'm just curious, I mean, it's a very nice data set for you to make it's a great data set for you to make the employer more aware of what's going on with the talent. Just out of curiosity, is there any added self-awareness for your employees as a result of MICA?
Self-awareness for employees?
Their own self-awareness. Have you seen any individual self-awareness improve?
Well, I think that's a good question. We haven't measured that, but I guess I would say that one thing we have observed is an uptick in people expressing interest in other roles. So it's probably raised their awareness of other opportunities beyond just their own, business unit or their own role. So we do see that, yeah. So question, yeah.
Every time I have a discussion related to artificial intelligence and the use of artificial intelligence for recruiting, the question of potential bias comes up. Mm-hmm. What have you guys seen as far as the risk for bias, whether it be for any type of minority, for just, you mentioned the example of cloning Eileen and finding the Eileens, but if you're so focused on the Eileens, you might miss the a diverse talent pool somewhere else. What is that risk, and what have you guys done to?
So that's a real risk, obviously, and we take that very seriously. I mean, we have a number of tools that we're using that if any of you have been following the press, some of that was subject to a lawsuit when we lost our head of diversity who went to Microsoft. So we do take that very seriously. I mean, some of it's proprietary, but we use a lot of analytics. So that very simple example I showed you, I think if that were the only tool you were using, you definitely have some risk there for sure. That's not the only tool that we use. But that's a real risk, and one that we're using very advanced analytics to help address. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you also sell them?
Many of these, I think all of these are also being used by IBM clients. Yeah, but sometimes slightly different variations, but yes, effectively they're all being used externally as well. Yes?
Back to the onboarding. Do you have the metrics in terms of the percent of folks that use it and their success?
Their success as employees?
Yes.
We are tracking that. It's a little bit too early to say. I mean, they're there, they're staying. So we know that from a retention perspective. And we did some early tracking about, we had a control group and we looked at things like, number of emails going to managers or HR or the recruiting team. So we had some early indications that in terms of productivity, it was trending in the right direction. And then we also did some surveys and asked employees, now that you've had this tool, are you comfortable using this tool, or would you rather talk to people? And like, no, I'll use the tool, thanks. So we had some results in that area as well. And a question here, yeah.
So I would imagine that you're finding this tool helps identify those out-of-the-box candidates better because of the attributes that you're prescribing to those successful types of candidates. And so clearly you're working with the line managers and C-suite to identify those attributes that they think are important from those successful profiles if they have them. Obviously, the higher you go, maybe not so easily identifiable, right, for the future. So I'm curious, all the research that I'm seeing is saying the AI will be very, very useful for the lower to mid-level positions, but perhaps it's self-serving, but the executive search side will still require more of the art of listening and assessing through experience, perhaps. Now, of course, AI can learn from that experience, but just kind of interested in what you're hearing from your clients in terms of the C-suite and first-line management positions.
I mean, I would actually say that across all recruitment, there's still a very vital human component to that. That's not going to go away. It really isn't. What some of this does is helps in the high volume situations to just drive greater efficiency. But certainly, just like it's always been, the higher up in the organization you go, the more critical your skills and services are. I don't see that changing at all. I do think you're going to have, and you're probably using some of these already, whether it's something as basic as LinkedIn, but you have new tools that are driving efficiency and allowing you to focus more time on understanding candidates, understanding the client's needs, getting the cultural fit right. So I think that will still be there, but I think there'll be newer tools that will help all of us be more efficient at recruiting as well. There was a question in the back.
Yeah, more of an observation on the assessment piece of it, or the evaluation piece of it. We got an opportunity to tour the IBM Global Solutions Center, and they showed us the AI machine behind what they're doing for retailers, how to predict purchase behavior for customers. Now, granted, that's probably a huge data set, but they showed us a radial stacked bar chart that was an assessment of that customer based on their social media, how they answer the questions with the chat bot, and it looked almost identical to some of the testing vehicles that our industry uses to assess candidates. The same sort of diagram output, and it was amazingly intuitive, and the pricing was it wasn't cost prohibitive even for medium-sized firms.
Yeah, I mean,
but the data set they must be using as an example is massive.
Yeah,
to get that kind of insight.
Exactly. So you can go online today. In fact, I would encourage you just to try out some of this stuff. You can go online today and just type in personality insights or IBM personality insights. It will take you to a page where you can copy and paste something you've written. It has to be, maybe like a page or something, or sort of 3 paragraphs, not just a few words, but enough information to get a sense of you. And as long as you've written that, pop that in, and it will come back to you with all of those attributes and assess, based on that, a number of aspects of your personality, very similar to what would be done in a traditional assessment. Now, is that the only thing you're going to use when you hire a candidate? Of course not, no. Does it provide some useful insights? Yeah, it does. I mean, try it next time on a candidate's resume. Try it on their LinkedIn profile. Just see what it says. I mean, it's an extra source of information. But that's very similar to, I think, what you saw on the consumer side as well. So with that, let's just do a quick wrap up here. Whoops, I forgot we had this one here. Okay, so we also use cognitive to help us with analytics, not surprisingly. And one thing we found very important in terms of retention of our team is getting ahead of negative sentiment, okay? So we're constantly sort of scanning internally and externally what employees are saying, what's coming up. And in this example, we saw some negative sentiment on the increase. And in fact, once we looked at the analytics, we realized the topic that was of concern to people had to do with a policy decision that had been taken very recently around being refunded for the use of Uber or Lyft or some of these services. And the decision had been taken, and this was back in 2015, that you couldn't be reimbursed for those because IBM felt it was dangerous, they weren't licensed, so we didn't feel our employees should be using those. And what we were able to do is identify that trend, stop it before it got outside into the public domain, and figure out what that issue was, take a quick decision that went all the way up to our CHRO about that, and then quickly communicate that decision. So what it enabled us to do was to get ahead of that issue, figure out that it was an issue, stop it, and turn around that sentiment. So a very simple but powerful example of how analytics, through the use of AI, can help organizations de-risk. So I see we are almost out of time here. So I'm just going to quickly go through to suggest a few things for those of you who are interested in learning more. You can go to our career site and just try uploading your resume, see what roles are recommended for you at IBM. But that's something easily done. Just go to the IBM.com career site, and you'll be asked if you want Watson to help you, and you'll be led through some prompts to upload a resume and see what it does with it. And then we also have a lot of research. You can just type in these terms into your browser, and you'll be quickly pointed to some of our more recent research in terms of cognitive in the recruiting and HR domain. So they told me if I don't end on time, I will be pulled off the stage, so I don't want that to happen. We do have another sort of 60 seconds here for any final observations or questions. But if not, I will thank you, and thanks so much for your questions and observations.
Okay. Thank you so much, Susan, for the great presentation. Just as a side note, we think of IBM and we think of big blue technology, just black and white type of situations. But it was IBM through Gerard Hofstede in the 1920s that developed one of the most comprehensive studies on cross-cultural behavior, and that's still being used today. So who knows? This seems a little bit like high tech that's not completely applicable to what we're doing. But this might have a very similar effect to what the cross-cultural studies that IBM did in the 20s. So we'll circle back to this presentation towards the end of the day, because one of the questions that we want to ask ourselves is, as these tools transform our clients, let's think about how the impact of what our client's transformation is going to impact our value proposition, and how quick is that going to end up happening. So we'll continue on our next panel. The panel will be moderated by Eileen Finn. Eileen Finn and Associates is a AESE boutique firm. She is specialized on the HR function, and she serves multiple clients, not just on the search part, but also on the coaching and other leadership advisory services. Eileen's perspective on just the HR function is also something that I believe will be good to be able to chat about, and we will also have a fireside chat after this panel to discuss that focus of specialization versus a generalist. So Eileen, I lost her right now. Oh, still getting mic'd up. Okay. So thank you, Eileen.
Okay, thank you, Jose. So, my panelists, come on. Bertrand, you can be a thorn between, what is it, two roses, or whatever it is, a rose between two thorns. Okay. So, given that this conference is all about disruption and innovation, as I thought about putting this panel together, I thought about, are we talking about disruption out there, or are we talking about disruption within these companies and all of our clients and what they're dealing with? So I think we're going to deal with both on this panel. And before I introduce our panelists, I just wanted to lead in by a few areas where I think we are seeing turmoil and disruption. Economic and political disruption and turmoil, horizontal mergers that are creating new business models like Walmart, Humana, Aetna, CVS, Amazon, Whole Foods, and the list goes on. Advanced analytic tools for almost every aspect